800-313-6400 today.
Listen. We are going to have open phones for the balance of the transmission when Larry Pratt leaves us. And I'm going to take 5 calls, cover a news story, take 5 calls, cover a news story. 1-800-259-9231 is the toll-free number to join us. We have an hour and 27 minutes left in this transmission. Larry, I saw him triple the size of the BATFE. I saw him build the biggest federal building anywhere in D.C. I saw Bush support the assault weapons ban. I would have gun show, people argue with me, or the guy at a gun shop argue with me, saying I was a liar. I knew they were harassing gun shops and dealers. I knew they were using extrajudicial, just executive, bureaucratic authority to do this. You were just talking about Holder with a bill introduced to give him unlimited power to ban any guns he wants. It says it in the bill. National registration, national federal testing, psychological records, misdemeanors can't own a gun, no fly list, can't have a gun. Well, they just put over 1 million Americans innocently on those, a blacklist. All of this is happening, and I keep trying to tell the listeners. Now I guess they're finally listening, record gun sales, but a lot of places they can't buy them. See, I got emails about that, but Larry Pratt wasn't telling me, and I didn't have time to track it down, about how a lot of these gun shops can't even sell guns now because they won't send them the yellow forms. I want to put the call out again to listeners, because JPFO makes films, writes books, is more of a think tank studying the gun grabbers, and I know you work with them. Jews Preservation of Firearms Ownership. It's one of the only national organizations other than you, but it's small. You've got 250-something thousand members next to the NRA's 2 or 3 million. It's always changing. And when we say the NRA, and I want you briefly to go into this, but then finish up your story from earlier first, about just the bureaucracy, saying we can shut down any gun show or gun shop we want without an arrest, without an indictment, without a claim, just we yank your license, kind of like Americans can't own guns on the new terror watch list, and there's Homeland Security says you won't be able to buy or sell. Your credit cards are going to be turned off. You're like, how do I get off this list? Haven't paid taxes, they're going to turn it off. It's not just the no-fly list, folks. It's a database. There's a lot I'm throwing out here. The point is, one more time, gunowners.org and the toll-free number. If people don't get a $20 membership, if they don't sign up for the free alerts, if they don't become life members, you're the only real big group we've got that I know is good, and I know is lobbying, and I know has a track record, and I know it's always been you guys that have beaten stuff. It hasn't been the NRA, and the people got to know this. So tell folks how to join.
Well, get information through the mail sent to you by calling our toll-free number, 888-888-6-GUNS, or 888 and then 886, and the letters GUNS. But for most people, I think, who have a computer, definitely easiest to go to gunowners.org. There they can get both the email alerts, which is a freebie, and then they can sign up as a member. They'll get a newsletter. They'll get legislative mailings on some of the more proactive projects that we're working on that are not as time-sensitive as the ones that are dealt with by the email, which are things that just come up all of a sudden and have a very short fuse on them. And there'll be things that we just don't even, we can't even mail on. There's so many things going on like this. I'm not sure whether we'll ever get to the mail on this notion that the dealers can be shut down now by some unnamed, unspecified, faceless bureaucrat, thousands of them throughout the country, pulling their licenses on really nothing type of complaints. And we've talked about it before. Maybe that they let 3 or 4 customers do an abbreviation for Baltimore, BLTO, instead of writing it out Baltimore.
Yeah, they're coming in and they're white glove inspecting everything. They're shutting down gun shops everywhere. They've introduced bills to shut down the gun shows, private transfer. But you're saying this was done as he left. They just did it by fiat. No law in Congress, no nothing. This is going on now. Now the gun shops are even in more terror.
Right. It's a proposed rule. There's sometime in April is the deadline for filing comments. We're not going to suggest that most of our members would enjoy writing directly to the Bureau, but we are going to make it so that they can do a little raining of email and comment to their members of Congress, so their members of Congress realize that if they don't do something about this, this is just going to be one more reason not to vote for them in 2 years.
Well, absolutely. On the subject, just briefly, the NRA, just give people a snapshot of what you've covered in the past, that this really is a gun control group.
Well, the biggest disappointment was their complete blindness to the Veterans Disarmament Act, as we called it, because it targeted veterans first. You can lose your right to keep and bear arms without even a smidgen of due process. No trial, no jury, no real judge, no real court, no lawyer, no expert witnesses, no cross-examination, no confronting your adversary, your accuser. Just you go before some bureaucrat, and you don't even go before him, actually. In the case of the veterans, if they get a diagnosis that says they have something like post-traumatic stress disorder, that they might be a danger to self or others, boom, they've just lost their gun rights. Again,
and Holder has said they're going to expand this to everybody and even get juvenile crime records and juvenile psychology records. Most of America has been sent to a psychologist at one time or the other because they advertise it's the thing to do. It's over.
The bill that we call the Veterans Disarmament Act, which I repeat, was simply named that by us because they were the first in the crosshairs. But as you're saying, all they need to do is appropriate the money that was authorized in that bill, and they're going to come after everybody else's medical records. It doesn't matter whether they were a veteran or not. All they have to do is have some indication that, as you say, you've been to a psychiatrist, and he has found in some way that a diagnosis that might make you a danger to self or others. Well, that could be perhaps 1%.
And they do that for everybody because they tell people go to it. They go to get you on insurance. I'm going to give you this diagnosis. There's literally close to 1,000 different ones. Sure. Even criticizing the government seen as a mental illness now. They have over 100 designations there. And this isn't your opinion. In the bill that the current White House Chief of Staff introduced last year when he was in the House of Representatives from Illinois, and he supported the total Chicago gun ban, the D.C. gun ban.
Sure.
Holder argued before the Supreme Court for a total gun ban. I mean, this is what they do. They've introduced that bill again, and I know you know this, but for the audience, that says you'll be federally tested and federally licensed, and all your psychological records must be provided by you in indentured servitude. You go before a federal board. That's how they basically banned guns in New York 30, 40 years ago, saying, oh, you can get a gun once you go to our board, once you get a psychological test, and then they just don't have the board meet once every 6 months and you can't get on the list. So through bureaucracy, you never get the gun.
And even if they give you an opinion, what do? You don't have a court trial there. You don't have any due process there. You're flat out of luck. It's just some folks that have some process that you may not even be aware of, and they render an opinion that says we don't find you fit to own a gun.
Now, they do that by fiat. When you can't get a gun, then you call, then you got to file paperwork, pay for a lawyer yourself, and then maybe get a hearing with a kangaroo court.
It'll be a kangaroo court because it'll be a hearing that considers a record that's already been produced by this body that screwed you to begin with. It's not as if you go into a court where you're supposed to have a clean slate, the government is accusing you, the burden of proof is on them, and then you start from there to build a record in a normal trial proceeding. The trial that they'll be talking about is more like an appeal where the only thing that can be considered is the record brought in from the lower, quote, court. Well, since they've already got about for instance, when the BATFE does this right now to dealers with their administrative law procedures, there's a 95% zapping of the dealer. So if a poor dealer wants to appeal to a federal court, even though the law says the court's supposed to give him that brand new trial, they don't. They accept the record of the bureaucrats.
So what's happening? Yeah. So they're putting our entire Second Amendment into a bureaucratic system, expanding the narrow bureaucratic powers they got under the 68 Gun Control Act to fully savage the Second Amendment outside any judicial system.
outside is the key, because that was supposed to be, short of the bullet box, the jury box was supposed to be our ultimate defense of our free society, of our free state, to use the term of the Second Amendment. And if the jury isn't even involved, they're so afraid of us that even though they often feed us like mushrooms and get juries to do things that if the jurors really knew what was going on, they wouldn't rule the way they do. But they don't even want to take that chance, and so they just bypass the jury altogether, because when you go into that federal court, the jury's never going to, if there is a jury, they're never going to hear any of your real case, because that's already been, quote, presented at the lower court, and they got it all structured and jiggered against you. A kangaroo court is a very apt description.
Well, the good news is, I've seen the numbers from the FBI, 44%, the previous highest record, now 4 months running with guns being purchased and ammo